Hello, everybody. It's Andy, and on the podcast, I like to talk to people about building wealth, investing, money making, finance, anything money related that's interesting to me. I like to talk about. And today, I have someone who kind of covers the full spectrum of those things. Today, I have Brennan Schlagbaum, who might be known to you as Budget Dog across social media. But a little about Brennan is he was a child fashion model for The Gap when he was growing up, or at least his mom dressed him that way. He was also a CPA at Deloitte, and him and his wife paid off $304,000 in just 5 years, which is mind-blowing to me. And recently, he left his job and he works for himself, doing his own thing, but also building audience and building an online community through all these social medias, which is how I met Brennan through Twitter. And as if all of that was not enough, are you not satisfied with that much? That's a lot. Like if that wasn't enough, Brennan at the age of 30 just became a millionaire. So Brennan, congratulations. Thanks for being here. Let's talk all about that.
Thank you, Andy. That's awesome. Awesome intro there. Yeah, it's been quite the journey. Back all the way to 23 years old. It's kind of when this whole thing started, and I got kind of online at 27ish or so, if I can remember backwards a little bit. I'm dating myself because I'm now 30. So yeah, it was a great journey. I mean, starting at 23, we were paying off all that debt. We just had a huge lump sum. It felt like. We graduated college. We had, student loans. We had car loans. We had a bed loan, a ring loan, and then we tacked on a big house on top of that. And it was just like all of a sudden it came at once, so it was a little overwhelming. And so we worked a plan, and through my strategies, paid that down, and it was an amazing experience. But then we started teaching people how to do the same, and that's kind of how Budget Dog, the evolution of Budget Dog, came to be.
Yeah, that's super cool. So, I mean, the most recent news and the thing that kind of sparked, I already had you on my list of people I want to chat with on the podcast, but the moment I saw you announce, hey, everybody, I'm 30 and I just hit millionaire status, I was like, I got to get him on the podcast to share some of the story. How did that feel? Like, what was that like? What, was it surreal? Was it another day in the office or like what? Tell me.
It was awesome. Don't get me wrong. It was very, very cool. It was a mile marker. How I kind of term it is like, it's not the end goal, but it was a really cool mile marker. And it was way earlier than I expected. Dating back, like I said, at 23, it would, if I told myself at 23, at 30, we'd be millionaires, I'd be like, yeah, you're lying to yourself. But really it became, I felt like I kept getting closer and closer the more work I put in. And I think that's what oftentimes happens with individuals is at first it's overwhelming, it's emotional. You put things on paper, you begin to attack a financial plan, and then you start to think of creative ways and get better and faster at what you're doing. And all of a sudden you're there before you know it. And it's a cool mile marker, but it's definitely not the end goal, like I said. So we have a lot of other goals, of course, but we definitely celebrated with some pizza and wine that night.
That's awesome. Pizza and wine, that's a pretty good celebration.
Crazy.
So tell me this. I'm always curious by anybody who has achieved, millionaire status, made it into the club. Yeah, there's plenty more goal markers ahead and all that. We all have our different long-term goals and stuff. But just the fact that you were able to get there means at some point in your life you decided this is a realistic goal or this is something I can achieve. So like what was it in your life or what was a series of things? Like how did you arrive at the conclusion that I can do this thing that other people do?
Yeah, I think the biggest thing was like looking at a compound interest calculator and realizing like this isn't as hard as I expected it to be, and understanding first off how millionaire net worth is calculated. I think there's a lot of confusion around that topic. So it's really assets minus liabilities, as you know, and most of the listeners probably know that. But understanding like, hey, a house is part of that, your investments are part of that, other assets that you have are a part of that, and you can accumulate a bunch of different things and get to millionaire status pretty fast. But looking at definitely from the investment side of things, the compound interest calculator, and I think the moment like I was like, wow, I can do this was when I started paying off the debt and I knocked off that first debt because I was like, I just set my mind to pay that debt off and I paid it off like really, really fast. Why can't I hit the next goal and the next goal and the next goal? And so really it was that first debt that was like, okay, this is eye-opening. I can actually do this if I stick my mind to it and I'm consistent throughout the 7-year journey that I was.
Yeah, that's super cool. It's compound interest and like looking at a calculator and seeing like, the hard math. It's one of those things that I just if I could just go back in time and just beat it into the head of 20-year-old Andy, because I was 29 before I said, oh, enough is enough. I got to get out of debt and everything. So, I'm a little later in my journey than you getting on board with all that stuff. So I'm always amazed at people who understand those concepts earlier because it was just foreign. I didn't understand it, at that stage. But yeah, let me echo and say the whole debt angle. Yeah, while me and you and you and others have very different definitions of what debt you should or should not pay off when it comes to mortgage and stuff like that. I think universally when it comes to damaging debt, I can agree with you big time that like the moment I start paying off a little bit of that, in our case it was like almost $90,000 worth of credit card debt, I started feeling the freedom and feeling the possibility, and that was like, oh, well, let's continue down this path and like see where it goes.
Absolutely, yeah. It's one of those things. It's kind of like a the way I look at it is it gives you momentum. The first one
Yeah.
goes, you get a little better, a little quicker, and it just keeps going and keep rolling. And all of a sudden, you're there before you know it. And by the time you get there, you've changed so much as an individual. Honestly, like because you've had to adapt yourself and change yourself to get to that point. Because millionaires think differently, multimillionaires think
Yeah.
differently. You know what I mean?
Hmm.
And the more you change yourself, you're just kind of already that person by the time you get there. You already visualize, you've already like felt mentally as a millionaire. And so when you hit that mark, it's a cool mile marker, but you kind of expect it in a sense.
Yep, for sure. So let's talk more about some of those ideas, and specifically, uh, I was I like a lot of your tweets, but there's two from the that you recently tweeted that stood out to me. One was the how I became a millionaire by 30 and kind of listed off a few things, and then you expanded that later and did a thread. But I'd love it if we could just spend a couple moments here talking through some of these things because one of the things a goal from this podcast episode is I want people to walk away from this with some kind of roadmap or idea of like, hey, this guy did it, Andy did it to some, a slightly different path, but still did it. Like people can do this; they're just normal, everyday people. So, like, certainly I can too. So, give them some kind of like tools to go start this journey for themselves. So, on this tweet, you say, "How I became a millionaire by 30." Budgeted, paid off debt, no FOMO investing, saved greater than 20% of my income, automated all bills and investments, didn't fall victim to lifestyle creep, and invested in low cost index funds. But the real key, I did this for 7 years every single day. So I love this tweet, but I would love to break it down piece by piece. And since you're the budget dog, please tell me why budgeting, even though we all roll our eyes at it, why it's like you cannot skip that step.
Yeah, it's like the foundational step 101 of finance, right? You have to know where your money is going. Like, you have to make sure you know what's coming in and what's going out, and then also where those things are going. And so all it is like an organization plan. You want to, if people want to term it something different, a spending plan, organization plan, a budget kind of gives you a bad connotation. That's fine. Call it whatever you want. But ultimately, you just got to know and be responsible with what comes in and what goes out. And that's the key of it. Honestly, that's all it is.
Why do you think most people have such a hard time like getting started on a budget, like keep committing to one or like doing one in the first place?
It's interesting. I look at them as fun. I know a lot of people don't. And so I think
Yeah.
initially, like, people are like, okay, this isn't even a fun task. Where's my template? Like, what all do I have to do? Like, what are all the things I have to do to get this actually in order? And I try to simplify that process. To some people, it might be, common sense or easy. And some people are like, I don't want to go through this, dreadful process. And I think it's just that initial, like that feeling of like, I don't want to do it is really what holds people back. Because when people get into it, I mean, come on, like we all know basic math. It's not like rocket science budgeting.
Yep.
All it is kind of allocating your dollars in the most appropriate way. And I think that's the big reason most people are held back.
Yeah. I think too, like everything you just said, I agree with. And I would also say that, in your daily life, if you work a 9 to 5 job or you have kids or you do something in life, there's aspects to it that it's part of the job that you don't like to do, but you do it anyways. You build like a habit or, in the job of life, we have to have successful finances. Otherwise, you're going to have a miserable rest of your life ahead of you. So it's just one of those things where I feel like you just got to get over that hump and just learn to like, even if you don't enjoy it, which it's, some of us, enjoy the numbers and like plugging in little things here that's fun.
Yeah.
But for people who it's never going to be fun, just getting into that habit. I think habits are one of those things that separates people who become millionaires and people who don't. It's like a lot of this stuff is just mindset shifts, honestly.
It is. And if you don't have, honestly, if you don't have the restriction mindset, you think it's going to restrict you, I think that will open your mind up to budgeting as well, because it's not restrictive at all. It's
Yeah.
actually freeing because you know where your money's going.
That's how I feel. Yeah, for sure. What's your favorite budgeting tool?
Excel, just basic old Excel. I use typically Mint to like kind of make it easier. I spend no more than 30 minutes per month doing this. So like I don't spend a lot of time doing it. I extract everything from like a Mint or You Need a Budget kind of an app, and then I just plop into my spreadsheet. My spreadsheet has all of these fancy tools and bells and whistles and formulas and stuff, and it does everything for me. And I kind of look at an analysis that way.
Cool. Is your spreadsheet template something you sell or give away
Yeah,
or do something?
yeah, it's in my Budget to Financial Freedom course.
Cool. Okay, so everybody should check
I
that
also have a
out.
free budget template if anybody just wants to get started for free. It's in my link in my bio as well.
Cool. And I'll remind everybody at the end of this episode, but I will put every link to all of Brennan's stuff in the description and show notes, as they call it on the podcast. I'm still new to podcasting. So the second step here is paying off all debt. And so it's 4 words in your tweet, but oh, such a big topic. You paid off $304,000 in 5 years, which I mean, it's just an incredible feat. So congratulations again on that. It's just first off, let's break it down, but start by telling me like what is maybe like the quickest way to like dip your toes into starting that process.
Yeah, I think it's just amortization schedules, which is simply listing out. It's a schedule of your debt payoff, exact timeline, exact to the penny, your principal interest portion. If it's a house, it would be additionally, it would have the PMI potentially or taxes involved with that. But it's really just mapping that out and showing you the entire schedule of your debt. And when I saw that, it was a freeing feeling because, emotionally, big debts are like, oh my God, my student loans are going to take for 25 years or something. It feels like it's never ending. When you just put it on paper, you can see it. And then I have a really cool tool that actually, if you add an additional income or principal payment to it, how fast that sheds off additional months. That was really cool because when I was paying off the debt, I was doing all sorts of side hustles. And we would, make $1,000 a month or something, and we'd throw that in there, and we'd see the impact of that.
Like so I've said this oftentimes about investing, getting ahead, investing, achieving your goals faster, getting rid of debt faster. It's like make more money, get more income. And people like of course, that's Andy. Of course, it's so easy for you to say. But I mean, how much slower would it have taken you to pay off $304,000 if you hadn't been like building more income sources or getting money on the side?
Yeah, I want to pause for a second and clarify this because I was getting a lot of shade thrown at me for not adding that bullet point. So I did add that, and I meant to add that increasing income. That's very important. There's no, it's obvious, right? But that was huge in our whole entire process. But a lot of it was before Budget Dog, and people didn't really understand that process. Is like Budget Dog didn't bring a lot of income when I first started, $0 for the first 16 months, and so this wasn't really much of a help, if I'm being honest. Up to about 800,000 was my W-2 job, my wife's job, W-2 job, as well as side hustles. But we would do really good on side hustles. So we would, really work hard to do, let's say $25,000, $30,000 in a given year and just side hustle income alone. So
Wow.
we were working a lot. I would take PTO from my Deloitte job, and I would go work at a construction site, hard hat and everything. And so it was $12 an hour at
That's
the
awesome.
time, but I would work, 10 hours a day and every single day of the week and on weekends and stuff like that. My wife was doing some really cool 2020 drawings with the skill set that she has, making $50 an hour, which was way better than I was and a lot easier. And we just racked up a lot of extra income, and it sped up the journey. Income is speed, but we need everything else in place in order for it to actually work.
Yeah, when it comes to all the online stuff and building an audience and sharing these things, people like to look at you like you're an overnight success. Yeah, 7 years in the making, but overnight success,
It's crazy.
right?
I didn't really expect, I'm so open and transparent with what I have. I don't hide anything. I show everyone what I do. And I was surprised by the number of comments once we actually hit that mark because I was even sharing the journey up until then. So it wasn't like it was just
hmm
random. And it was like
hmm
a lot of people came out of the woodwork.
Yeah. It's social media is this wonderful thing where obviously we can build like entire businesses around it or utilizing it or as a springboard from it. And there's so much support and love and whatever in these communities. But conversely, you get all the other people too.
Yes.
So
Yeah. There was a lot of
gotta
support
take,
for sure.
yeah, yeah. So aside from that, like, what was the strategy? Was it highest interest first? Did you do the normal type of like strategy for paying it off? Or like, how did you attack the debt?
Kind of like a combo approach between the avalanche and the snowball method. So
hmm
really what I looked at is like, okay, so obviously avalanche was more attractive an approach to me, but if we had a really, really small debt, for example, like we would just knock that one off, $1,000 or
Yeah.
whatever. I think the bed was like $3,000 or whatever in total. And that was like the first line of attack because I wanted a little bit of like that momentum feel. But I think it was a 0% interest rate, but we decided to pay that one off first because I was like, let's just get it gone. And
Mhm.
then after that, it was kind of a mixed approach. Typically, the avalanche, so the highest interest rate was like our focus. But I always do that for my clients, and kind of aligning a debt payoff plan is like I don't always just do one or the other. I kind of make a common sense approach to it. So if there is like a $500 credit card that has, you know, 10% interest or even 0% interest, it's only $500. So it's almost like, let's just get that gone because it's going to feel really good.
Yeah.
So it's person to person. It's unique to everybody.
And you was talking about like a bed that you had this debt on and stuff. What do what do you say now, looking after you paid all this stuff off? People who are like, I'm gonna get a loan to get this furniture or this TV or this bed or fill in the blank. Like, what do you say to those people?
I think it's just a waste of your time and energy. I think those little tiny consumer type items don't make much benefit to your life. I understand some of these things are a little more expensive, 2,000, 3,000 bucks. I get the 0% interest argument, but at the end of the day, I think um, too many little debts are going to kill you like a bunch of paper cuts would. So like it
Mhm.
just doesn't make a whole lot of sense to me to add that complexity to your life, all those extra payments you're making per month and extra cash flow going out the window. Like let's just save up and pay for those types of items. And I get the whole, if I always look at it like this. If you have an asset attached, an actual asset that's cash flowing, I'm cool with low interest debt. I am cool. I understand my house payoff, but I'm okay with, I understand it. But like a bed or like some consumer type item like a Best Buy like loan or something, like just don't even play that game.
Yeah. With it sounds a little bit like you do agree with this, but do you agree with the statement that, with the exception of things like a house or whatever, if you can't afford to buy it in cash, you shouldn't be buying it?
Very fair take. I like it a lot.
Yeah. Cool. So the next thing on this list, and we kind of covered the in between the lines here, like get more income, but and I think that all I think you said it very well. It kind of comes down to like, if you're willing to make the sacrifice of time, it can really speed up things. I think it's a really good way to say that.
Yes.
The next thing on here, it says no FOMO investing. Explain yourself.
Yes. So fear of missing out for those that don't understand FOMO investing. But I think 2020 we saw a huge upswing in FOMO investing. And I
Tons.
think in
Yeah.
2022, everyone's realized looking back that was a really bad idea. So typically that happens with highly speculative assets. And I think a lot of people were in like ARK, Doge coins of the world, and like those
Mhm.
just like really trendy type of things.
Yep.
And it wasn't something I ever was very interested in because I knew it was a quick ride up and a quick ride down typically. I'd rather be in quality assets for the long term that I know will compound and I set myself up. Now, if you want to take a little bit of gamble or risk with a little, portion of your money, go for it, but allocate that risk accordingly. It's like what I did with Meta, which has not looked great so far. But
Hmm.
I still am very bullish on it, but it hasn't looked great right now. But allocate accordingly and kind of have a good financial plan in place before you start just throwing money in like whatever the internet tells you to throw money in.
Yeah, I think that's good. So how do you personally, like, when you're assessing percentages of your portfolio? I know you have some Bitcoin and maybe some other
Ethereum.
cryptocurrency too,
Yep.
Ethereum. So like, but mostly index funds and stuff. And like, how do you personally assess and risk tolerance? Like, how do you decide I'm going to risk this percentage for this asset?
Yes, good question. So I typically look at my goals and I list all those goals out, and then I kind of back into, let's just say, assumed contribution percent or contribution number. So let's just say for sakes of the argument or for the conversation is like we have $2,000 to work with, and all my goals accumulated to $1,500 to allocate to all those different goals. I put all of my $1,500 in there, and I have $500 on top of that. Now, I have two options. I can go ahead and put that towards the current goals to speed those goals up even faster, or I can take a big swing elsewhere. And so I think this is a approach that I've always taken my entire life is I like to set the foundation, I like to set the base layer, and then I get to decide and have a lot of, I get the opportunity to decide where that extra 500 goes. And so what I've always done is like kind of set that base layer, and then I kind of make that judgment call. I think judgment comes into big time here. I'm very bullish in crypto and Web3 and stuff like that. So I love Bitcoin and Ethereum. Could I be entirely wrong? Sure, I could be,
Mhm.
but I'm willing to take that risk and put a small allocation towards that.
Yeah, I think that's a cool way to look at it. So basically, what your in your personal equation there, your personal risk tolerance, you're treating things like Bitcoin or Ethereum that could be these asymmetric bets. These are purely icing on the cake things. You're not even including them in in your goals, like your journey to the goals. That's all equated in the equation. That's all taken care of ahead of time. And then with what's left of your investable money, whatever it is per month, then you're saying, how can I maybe accelerate that? But if this stuff goes to zero, I'm good. Like I'm still multimillionaire in a few years. You know, all these goals I have are done, baked
Spot
in.
on.
Is that right?
Spot on. And the thing is, like, although I'm bullish on like the Ethereums and the Bitcoins of the world, I just don't. You can't really make an assumption and kind of like get to a goal. It's
Mhm.
really hard, obviously, as we've seen a lot of volatility. So like, you can't be like, oh, 8% returns with like index funds is pretty standard, 8 to 10%. I can't say the same about Bitcoin, so I can't put Bitcoin as like my retirement fund and say, okay, I hope it goes at 12% or something like that. So yes, exactly. I want to make sure my goals are set. Then anything additional, I have a lot of leeway to kind of work with and make educated bets.
Yeah, cool. And so, what are the of the safer things that are going towards your goals of the index funds? What are the index funds you're in?
Yeah, so VTSAX is my biggest one. My
Hmm.
pride and joy, which is the U.S. stock market, international fund VTIX, and I also like a little bit of emerging markets long term as well. So I have much smaller portion in emerging markets, but I'd say and even emerging is within the big international fund as well. So I'm pulling out a little more of emerging, and my kind of goal with that is kind of looking at it as like an asymmetric risk reward as well,
Hmm.
taking a bet on a 20-year type of time frame.
Yeah, and for those listening who don't know what we mean by asymmetric, it's just something that if you allocate a small percentage of your portfolio, your money towards this thing, that if it goes to zero, it doesn't materially hurt you overall. So let's say you have $100, $99 goes to the stuff you consider safe or whatever. $1 goes to something that could go to zero. So then you have $99 left. But if the thesis is correct that you think it's going to do a 10,000x or 1,000x or whatever, it could actually make up a whole bunch of the growth of your entire thing. But the risk to reward it's a very nice balance, in my opinion. It's why I love asymmetric bets.
Yes, my favorite thing in the world.
Yep. So, okay, so we kind of covered that, which I love. So let's talk about like how much you're actually putting towards these investments. The next part of this tweet is saving greater than 20% of your income.
Hmm.
Like I know that most people in the U.S., if anything, it's like 1 to 5%. I don't even know maybe you know the stat, but like, how do you get to greater than 20%? It's very, very lofty goal for I think a lot of people. How do you get there?
Yeah, so I think there's a few things to other bullet points that kind of feed into this one as well. So budgeting is the key. So you have to know where your money's going and you can kind of
Mhm.
allocate the most appropriately. The lifestyle creep one is huge because I think that takes a lot of people's money a lot of times. So if you take those two things or you put those two things in place, I think you have more money than most people would expect if you just do that. But most people won't even go to that step or that length of effort. But assuming that really setting the automation with that is really important. So I also mentioned automation, how important that is because we're human. We make emotional decisions, irrational decisions all the time. And I know that about myself. So my goal is to automate this process to basically make it robotic in the sense that, like, okay, we have our base set. Like I always talk about that foundation at 20%. Anything greater is even if we screw up the extra 5% we had, we at least did 20%. Now, along this entire journey of paying off debt and investing and stuff, we've gone from 20% all the way up to 78%. And most of that is automated at this point in time. And so that wasn't always easy. We had no children at the point in time. We have one little girl now, so it's a little different. But I think automation is going to really set people apart from the people that decide to like kind of manually do this whole entire game.
What's your exchange of choice for doing that?
Vanguard. Vanguard is my number
Vanguard.
one place to invest for sure. I use my HSAs, at a bank. Obviously, it's obviously can't be through Vanguard. But all my investment accounts are through Vanguard. And then for crypto, I do through Binance. I buy, but I put it on my Ledger ASAP.
Nice. With the HSA, is it something you max out? You encourage maxing
Yes,
out?
absolutely. I think the HSA is one of the best accounts out there. Just the triple tax savings and obviously the other additional benefits I talk about all the time. Like it's hard to go wrong with the HSA, and obviously this year with all the
Hmm.
medical problems we've had, like it's really helped. So I think right now what is our max per year? I think is 7,300 roughly for the family. And if you can do that and you have the flexibility to do an HSA, I highly recommend it because we all are going to have health needs in the future, whether we have them now or not.
And everything you have in the HSA, is that invested as well, or? or is it just sitting
Everything
there?
above $1,000. So there's a bank
Okay.
requirement for a lot of these HSAs. Is $1,000 you have to keep in cash, but everything above $1,000 is fully invested. We actually don't use our HSA, which is one of the intended benefits. Is like we can pay out of
Hmm.
pocket, and then at a later date in time, we can pull tax free that money if we need
Hmm.
to. So to date, we haven't touched our HSA, but it's there if we need it as like a emergency fund in a sense.
Yeah, HSA is something I overlooked for a long time until I realized it was like another retirement account. Maybe
Mhm.
can you talk a little bit about that, like long-term benefit when it turns into that?
Yeah, I love this. I love this talk about HSA. So basically, what this is like the money that goes in is pre-tax. So the tax benefit number one, what you invest in is then growing tax free, and then what you pool for qualified medical expenses. You can look up like a list online if you're curious if it's qualified. Will be tax free as well. So if you decide not to, pay out of pocket and you don't use that third benefit, and I pay out of pocket for my daughter's medical and ER and ICUs, all these things, I can basically accumulate those receipts, save those receipts, and then pull that number from that HSA account at a later date and time. Then another cool thing is the benefit of the retirement. So that account essentially becomes a traditional IRA at the age of 65. And that's basically another retirement account vehicle that you can use if you don't use it for medical purposes or you don't pull tax free from all the other spend that you've done out of pocket as well.
Yeah.
It just provides like ultimate flexibility. I think they joke like Congress was drunk when they actually made this law because it's just so good.
Yeah. I mean, I feel that way about the HSA. I feel that way about the Roth IRA too.
Yes.
It's like that was one of the first things when I first got my finances back on track. I read all these personal finance books, and one of the things that experts will always recommend is open a Roth IRA. I'm like, I don't know what the hell this is, but I'll do the thing that the experts tell me to do now. And I'm like, that's it's such a smart thing to do early on. It's such a great tool for later on. Now, I don't personally plan, and I'm sure you're probably the same way. I don't personally plan to wait till 65 to retire.
Mhm.
Um, but it's nice to know that if, other things fail or whatever, I have this, huge nest egg still built up in this purely retirement. Plus you can ladder withdraw and there's all kinds of like workarounds and stuff. It's a very interesting account type that I'm really happy that we have access to.
So many cool ways to early withdrawal from that. There's three specific ways, but the cooler thing about that is like it is exactly what you said. Like I don't plan to retire actually, to be honest, but I kind of plan to retire. Like I've already retired in a sense.
Hmm. Yeah.
But my goal is to really work and do what I love to do. But I know there's issues that we can't foresee. So if something happens with my daughter, or if something happens with me, like health related reasons, I want to know that I have something there topped on other things we don't talk about often is like disability insurance because like 1 in 4 people are become disabled during their working lifetime, or life insurance. If I were to pass
Hmm.
away and I left my wife and daughter without any life insurance, that would be an issue. So like
Yeah.
setting yourself up is really really important, and really setting that base.
Yeah, and maybe we'll talk more about this in just a little bit when we start talking about like leaving your job and working for yourself and stuff. But I do want to really quickly here talk about early retirement, and I'll give you my really short definition for myself, and I'm curious what yours is. Early retirement for me is that just work is optional if I want it to be. So I have enough money that if today I'm like I don't want to do anything for money, I have plenty of money to like just sit on my butt and read books all day if I wanted to. I'm not going to. I like doing things too much, but it's the work optional aspect. You finally hit that. What is it for you?
I think it's like literally spot. We're pretty similar in that
Hmm.
thinking. Is like I like to work. I really like to do what I do.
Yeah.
I like to help people with their finances. But if one day I'm like, hey, you know what? Some troll came at me and I'm not feeling the best today. Like I'm just gonna take a day off and just hang out. I can do that. I have flexibility.
Yeah, that's cool. So the next thing on this tweet was, and you talked about it a little bit, but I'd love you to give some more context around that. Don't fall victim to lifestyle creep. What is that, and why do we need to watch out for it?
Yeah, so lifestyle creep is when basically you worry about all your neighbors, friends, and colleagues and what they buy, and you try to keep
Hmm.
up with them. Another word to say is keeping up with the Joneses, or a phrase people often
Yep.
use. And so that's one thing I think we've always been really good at. And I don't know if that's just natural confidence. And I'm just like, I don't care what my neighbor has. I don't care what my mom has. Like, that's cool. They have it and they want that. All power to them. But I don't want that. And so being able to choose for yourself, and I tweeted today, like, hey, if no one saw your car ever, would that change your decision of what you drive? And I got some interesting responses on that tweet. So it was just interesting to see because that happens so often. And so at 23, we set what our living standard was. We don't have a very fancy living standard, but we don't have like a beans and rice type of living standard at all. We travel a lot of places across the world. We live really nicely in a great, beautiful house, have totally fine cars, but I'm not worried about the Lamborghini or the Mercedes or something like that. It's just not in my. I don't care for it. It doesn't bring value to me, so I don't need to buy it. So we've set our base, and we've kind of had our expenses flatlined since 23, but our income's gone up a lot. So we've just basically the separation in that has been able to fast track all of our goals.
Yep. When Bitcoin hits $1 million per coin and Ethereum is like 50,000, maybe then Brennan's got the Lamborghini. We'll see.
Yeah. Then I'm going to become a crypto expert all of a sudden.
Yeah, there you go. I think something interesting you're talking about, though, and you alluded to it a little bit, and I know for a fact, I know I've gotten this flack. I can guarantee you've gotten this flack. It's like you work so hard, you make all these sacrifices, you do this thing to accelerate this course, and if you're doing this on this shorter timeline, you did all this in 7 years. My timeline, I went from 0 to millionaire in about 6, but I went from negative 90,000 to millionaire in about 8. It took me about 2 years to tackle the debt, which is a while, but it's shorter than a lot of people do it. But still, people think with that sacrifice to do it in a shorter time span, you never have any fun. You never buy anything for yourself. You can't do anything fancy. Like, what do you say to those people? Like, how do you balance that?
Yeah, so it's always interesting. I get that all the time. And the thing is, like, I do enjoy my life. So, like, I do what I want to do at this point. Like, I have traveled to Hawaii, to Curacao, to Cabo, to Punta Cana, like to Haiti, like literally within a 7 year period. We're talking actually 5, because before my daughter came, we haven't been able to travel with my daughter because her health's up. But like before that, it was like a 5 year window. And we were doing a lot of travel, a lot of cool stuff, but we spend our money in different ways. So like people like to judge you based on what you buy physically. We spend on experience, going out to eat, traveling, things like that. But people don't see that because I'm, driving my Hyundai Sonata or Chevy Equinox, like nothing crazy, and I live in a average paid off house. And so like people don't see that. And so I like to explain, guys, spend money where you value it, and don't spend money where you don't. And that's going to save you a lot of money.
Yeah, I think it's really, really wise words. And then the last part of this we kind of already covered, which is investing in low-cost index funds. Maybe you can briefly talk about why you think low-cost index funds are the best way to build wealth over time.
Yeah, I think the best way to put it is you're buying a collection of stocks or assets or whatever you're trying to buy, and you don't have to time the market. With that, I obviously am dollar cost averaging in. So I am just automating my entire investment journey. And the greats like Warren Buffett will obviously say like 99% of people should be in low cost index funds. You don't have to worry about like technically diversification as much, so because one basket of stocks or index fund might have 500 or 4,000 stocks, and you don't have to go pick these individual stocks and worry about the metas of the world that just drop through the floor. And long term they've always, let's just say 8 to 10% return. As long as you're automating this, you don't freak out, you don't, panic sell and things like that. You're going to be set up for success long term. So it's kind of a for sure way to beat or to be the market. An interesting stat that I always talk about is the average investor and the average market are two different things. The average investor the last 20 years was 3.6% returns. The average market was 9.5. So if you just automate and dollar cost average in, you're going to be crushing the average investor. I think a lot of people think index funds are boring, but I don't think they understand the difference between average investor and average market. And I think that would skew their decision a lot.
Yeah. So the question I just wrote down to follow up with that was, what do you think is in your mind is the danger of the average individual investing in individual stocks versus an index fund, which you did just touch on a little bit. Maybe more color if you have
I think
it.
the crazy thing about that is there's another stat I like to say. I think it's JP Morgan, 1981 to like 2014, like 7% of all the stocks accounted for all the gains. So like if you're going to try to
It's crazy.
pick the needle in the haystack, like good luck. Like I'm not saying you can't pick individual stocks, but like you really got to put some diversification tools in place, which index funds provide that. For the average investor, we just don't have all the information, and there's things that are not known to us, and there's future events that aren't going to happen until all of a sudden they happen, and things just get slashed in half. So unless you are like the all-knowing, like have a crystal ball, it's really hard to do that.
Yeah, and I fully recognize that my own investing is significantly riskier than a lot of people, especially someone like you who's mostly index funds. But even within the realm of crypto, I'm seen as very conservative because that's how I treat Bitcoin. I know the dangers of individual altcoin positions because crypto is such a tiny slice of the entire world, money flow and stuff, and it's just so scary to go all in on these random coins and stuff. Which, yeah, you might pick it right. Same with
Sure.
individual stocks. But yeah, I agree with you that most people are much better off with just grab themselves an S&P 500 index fund with most of your money, and then anything else after that you can play around with things or whatever. But like, it's just so hands off. You don't have to think about it. It just frees up so much mental space. Whereas other things, you'll drive yourself crazy, I think.
I think there's a weird assumption that they can't get you rich or can't get you wealthy, and like that's
Mhm.
so far from the truth. Like if anything, it's probably the most likely thing to get you wealthy and the highest odds to get you wealthy. So I don't know what it is about them. Maybe it's just money Twitter in particular, because you talk to people offline, they don't even know what an index fund is, but it just seems like such a surefire way to. It puts you in the top 10 to 15% of investors long term if you can actually maintain a position the entire time.
So you just jumped into my next question, which is another follow up to that, and maybe you feel comfortable, but have you already answered it? But what do you say to somebody who, when you say, S&P 500 index fund, or broad market index fund, this is the way for most people with the most of your wealth building and stuff, and they go 10%, lifetime return year over year. Like, what's the point? I can go elsewhere and get more. Like, what do you say to people who think that's a sad amount of money, a sad
Yeah.
return?
Oh man, this conversation gets me heated. So, 10%, man, like 10% is a phenomenal return, and people don't
Yep.
understand this until they put this on paper. So, like, I did a YouTube video. Is like how important time is. Time is your biggest. I always talk about the wealth triangle, right? Time is the most important by far. Wealth building tool. The second is contributions, what you put in. The third is asset percent return, or that 10%. And so people that tell me they're getting 4 million% or whatever, 80%. This guy on Instagram claimed he got 95% average annual returns. Um,
Oof.
and sometimes it's laughable because the greats like Warren Buffett are at 20%. And that's
Mhm.
double the market, which is absolutely insane in itself. So if anybody's going to claim that 10% is weak, just open a compound interest calculator and do the math and show how big that is. And if you really think you're going to be 20% annualized returns, or even like 15, if you even beat the market like in itself on a net return, like please give me a call because I will put some money in you because it is extremely hard. We're talking less than 1%ers are doing this type of stuff. So it's just the reality of the statistics out there that I could break down so many statistics to say why just getting that and sticking with that for a long period of time is going to literally make you so wealthy.
Yeah, and I think maybe you can tell me if you agree with this or not, but I think a lot of people who have that attitude, they're dealing with fairly small amounts of money. So they look at, like, I've only got a $500 to invest, I have $1,000 to invest, 10% over 10 years, this thing turns into whatever,
Mm-hmm.
or I do this crypto thing and maybe it does 1,000x, whatever like that. But I think they're missing what you've already alluded to, which is the big point, which is even if you start small, if you can repeat that small step over and over, it'll eventually get bigger. And then all of a sudden, a 10% move on $100,000 is way bigger than a 50% move on, $5,000, something like that. Even though you get, yes, smaller, but they're stable returns, they end up being way bigger returns just over time.
Two things to that: 99% of Warren Buffett's wealth came after the age of 50. So as
Yes,
wealthy as he
wild.
is, like it's insane.
Yeah.
And secondly, if you really want to get rich quick, you have to like create a business, or you'd have to create an idea that's going to generate that, or be a Powerball winner and get extremely, extremely lucky, basically
Mhm.
getting struck by lightning. So it's just not worth it to try to get rich quick, in my opinion. The asymmetric risk reward bets are totally fine, but just set the automation, build the muscle memory behind investing that $500 or whatever that number is, and focus on increasing your income, your active income to throw into those investments. That's going to get you a lot further than trying to hit the lottery. That's going to usually keep you broke forever, because if you have losses, to come back is even harder.
Yeah, 100%. And speaking about that automated buying again, how often do your automated buys happen?
Pretty much every week something's coming out. I have
Mhm.
weekly, I have bi-weekly, and I have monthly, depending on the type of account and type of investment. Um, my most of our accounts are bi-weekly and they are like offsetting. So my wife's IRA versus my IRA is technically every week something's coming out. Our brokerage is every single week. My daughter's accounts are monthly, etc. So we have my cryptos every week, every Sunday, in fact. So like it's just kind of all over the board, but typically within a month time frame, week to a month.
My dollar cost averaging for crypto is every day. You got to get on my level,
I
Brennan.
love it.
Every
That
single
wouldn't
day.
be a bad idea, actually. That would be a really good idea, to be honest, for crypto.
It seems to make sense to me in my mind with crypto just because of the extreme volatility of
I
it. But yeah.
agree 100%.
So with the basically with your main investments, you're hitting something every week. Why that versus a lump sum at the beginning or end of the month?
Yeah, so the lump sums, if I do have a lump sum that comes in the door from a business deal or whatever, I will throw that into the market right away. My goal is just as
Yeah.
much time in the market as humanly possible. So I dollar cost averaging a good way to kind of get that money in there every single week and just get it in there as fast as possible for as long as possible.
Yeah, cool. Okay, let's switch gears, and I want to talk about a topic that's very dear to me, and I'm super excited that you are now a part of the club, the Entrepreneur Club. I want to talk about leaving your job.
Yes.
Like, one, why? Like, I mean, if at Deloitte especially, I mean, you can make so much money working a job with them, jobs like that, especially as a CPA and stuff, especially once you like make partner or various things like that. I mean, those salaries are huge. So why? What was the motivation to leave all that behind?
Yeah, I wanted to do what I love to do, which was help people with personal finance. And so at Deloitte, it was a great job. I learned a lot of stuff, a great experience as a manager there for 6 years. And I realized but didn't light me up. That didn't really get me up in the morning. It was more like, hey, I have to have my alarm hit like 8 times before I wake up. I'd have to like push myself out the door to the gym and like I'd have to do all these things. And now I feel like I get to do all these things. And that was really a big motivating factor for me is like, seeing like at 24, 25 years old, 27 years old, like, do I really want to do this for another 30 years and like live that life of a partner? And I saw so many things wrong about the culture there, which, no shade by any means, because I love the people I worked with. But there were times where like my manager or senior manager would call their kids at 8 p.m. from the office to put them to bed. And that did
Oof.
not sit right with me at all.
Yeah.
And I had some pretty real conversations with myself, and my wife is like, is this something I really want long term? And as we were kind of so motivated to pay off all this debt, Budget Dog became a thing, personal finance became a thing, and I was helping a bunch of people, and it really was just a hobby at that point in time. But it's developed into something so much bigger, and it's such a passion of mine that I've been able to monetize as well. And so it made a lot of sense to take that leap of faith at a young age and say, if it flops, I can go back to becoming a CPA at any other CPA firm in America, and I could still do that. So why not take the chance when I'm young and really live life?
Yeah, I think everything you just said there was really awesome, and I think I feel like that's a common trait among people who've done the entrepreneur path or the working for yourself path. Is it's a very terrifying prospect to think about myself as like an 80-year-old on my deathbed with these what ifs.
Yes.
What if I had done that? And yeah, you might fail. But what if you don't? What if it all works out and you're happier than you ever were before, more fulfilled and stuff? I think that is if people like, what do you say to people who are too afraid to make those leaps? Like, what would you say to them to help them ease their fear? Like about maybe failure's not as big of a deal as they think, or what do you tell those people?
Yeah, I failed my whole life. Like I still fail every day. I failed my
Mhm.
CPA test a lot of times. Like I'm very open with failure. I don't care. I guess I have enough confidence to be like, I'm learning. I'm getting further and further every time I fail. So I always looked at it as an opportunity. So as long as I'm not just like running into the same door 25 times, not learning my lesson,
Yeah.
I'm really getting some active lessons from these failures. Like it's a good positive step forward, whether it feels like it or not. And so for the people that are afraid to take that leap of faith, ask yourself and be real with yourself is like, at 80, at 70, when you look back, are you going to regret this decision that you didn't take that chance on yourself and you lived a life that was kind of like told or like forced upon you? And there's nothing wrong with W-2 jobs by any means. Like I'm cool if you like your job, go for it, do your thing. But if you really want a better life for yourself, you have to take chances. You have to stop being scared. And it's not that we weren't scared. I was scared. I had a lot of anxiety and fear in leaving my job to have my whole entire income for my household reliant on me, basically. And but I decided to anyway. And I think if you get your finances right, that's the first step to kind of taking that leap of faith. You have confidence because you have that emergency fund that kind of bails you out if something bad happens. You have all these things in place that you feel confident about long term, and that's a beautiful thing.
Yeah, and I think I would agree about the anxiety and the fear and stuff when you first made that transition. But I also think, and you didn't really say it specifically, but I can hear it in your voice that it's like the other element of it, that why certain people like us, or maybe mint or are passionate about this whole working for ourselves thing, is because the challenge of it. It's like if we don't make it work, then it just doesn't work.
Yes.
There's no one else to blame. There's no one else to fall back on. It's like it's up to us to make this thing work. And if we don't, it doesn't work out, we go do something else. It's fine. But the challenge and thrill of like having to make it work, and then when it does start to work, it's very, very fun.
It's such a rewarding like lifestyle to like help people with finance and get monetized from it and build a real core business, not just an Instagram account, but a real business underneath it.
Yep.
It's so fun. I love it. I love doing it every single day.
Yeah, and maybe this is also one of your motivators, but something that always was in the back of my mind. And if you don't feel like this, then maybe entrepreneurship isn't for you. But I'd always felt like I would rather. I don't want to spend my entire life building someone else's dream when I could spend my whole life building my own dream or chasing my own goals. And entrepreneurship is like that ultimate freedom to do that. Is that how you feel about
Oh
it?
yeah, and you have to be a self motivator. Like entrepreneurship
Yep.
is for a very small, unique population because
Yeah,
most
it's
people
true.
are like need that little whipping. Like I've always
Yep.
hated bosses, and it has nothing to do with the actual boss itself. I don't like anybody to tell me what to do because I am
Hmm.
so on it and so like proactive about what I'm trying to accomplish. Is like I don't need that motivation, the outside
Yep.
force, but most people do. So if you're that person, that's okay. There's nothing wrong or right about it. Just realize what type of person you are before you take this leap because if you don't get moving and you don't make income, you are going to be poor on the street.
Yeah, yeah. And maybe you have to take the leap to really learn that about yourself. And so maybe it's a good thing to like build yourself something to fall back on. So let me talk to you about this aspect. What are the practical things if you work a 9 to 5 job right now? Like what did you do, or what do you suggest people do if they work a 9 to 5 job right now? They want to try this out, maybe to see if it's a fit for them or not. But how can they ensure that if they do fail at it, it's a good lesson, it doesn't actually hurt them long term? Like what can you do practically?
Yeah, a few things. Save up an emergency fund, know where all your cash flow is going from a budget perspective. And what I did personally was for 12 months before I actually took that leap of faith, I was making at or above my 9 to 5 income. And it was consistent. So I made, and some people like to take a little more chance than I do, but that's just how I operate as I'm calculated with that. Some people are like, hey, YOLO, I'm going to quit my job today and figure it out as I go, sink or swim.
Mhm.
I was of the belief that like, hey, instead of doing this, like let's be a little more smart about this and strategic. And like I had a little girl on the way at the time. Like she came like literally 3 weeks after I quit. So there's a lot of pressure there. But I just did it for 12 months at or above my 9 to 5 income, plus a larger emergency fund underneath me, a cushion. And if I failed, I knew that I was able to kind of lean on that for assistance in the meantime.
I think that's an awesome roadmap, and that's exactly what I would suggest. I when I did it myself, it was a little bit on the riskier side. My business that I've been running for the past 10 years that I built on the side while I worked my 9 to 5 job, it was making as much as my 9 to 5. So I had that aspect, but I didn't have the emergency fund saved up and things like that. So I think that is so powerful. Even if that's the first thing you do, it's like it's just the and in Twitter, there's lots of back and forth about peace of mind and if it's a good investment or not, But it makes a lot of sense to me. Like financially, it protects you from those fallouts.
Yep.
What is your recommendation for people with an emergency fund to start and then like longer term?
Yeah, I think 3 to 6 months is a totally reasonable emergency fund. Depending on your level of risk, less risky. You could probably go to 3 months, more risky 6 months. If you are like one of those individuals in every life like style change or life event change, like let's just say you retire, you might want a larger emergency fund if you don't have as much active income coming through the door type deal, and you're not fully prepared type deal. But like if you're young, like you know. Individual with two W-2 jobs, maybe it doesn't need to be as large. So like everyone's situation is different. Maybe kids enter the picture and it needs to get a little bigger, more than 6 months because maybe one spouse works at that point in time. There's one income, so it just kind of depends on the situation. But a good rule of thumb is the obvious 3 to 6 months of expenses.
Yeah, cool. So when did you leave the 9 to 5 to pursue this?
August of 2021, so about a year and a couple months.
Okay, so you're a little over a year into it. What is one or two things that maybe you didn't realize you're going to learn that you've learned that you think people should really know before like making this leap?
The that anxiety feeling, man. It's it's strong. Like it
Mhm.
was like, oh my, like I remember the high leaving my job. I was like, oh my god, this is the best thing. I think I went out to hang out with Chris Johnson for his 30th that week, and I paid off my house that week, and I quit my 9 to 5 that week. So it was like I was
Wow.
up here. And then I kind
Yep.
of got back to reality. And my daughter came, and like I was like, oh my god, I'm a stay-at-home dad. I'm running my business. I'm busy. And I was like, I also got to produce income, and that was a very tough time. I actually wrote an email to all my followers to share my inside thoughts, exactly how I was feeling at that point in time. It was October of 2021, and it was a real like scary moment. Although I was doing very well, which is very odd. It doesn't even matter if the income's there or not. It's just gonna feel very uncomfortable. But I
Mm.
knew that was the right route because if I'm scared and uncomfortable, I guarantee it's something I'm onto something.
Yeah, that's great. I think it's really cool that you have a community of people who decided to like follow along on the journey that you can just email honest thoughts like that. That's
I'm
pretty
pretty
cool.
trans. I share everything, which is I always think it's funny when people call me out and be like, "Oh, did you get an inheritance for a millionaire?" I'm like, "No, I share every detail." Like,
We were part of the 88%. Self-built, baby.
yes, exactly.
So, talking about, you've made this step into this world of like your own business and like creating content and stuff online, these social media profiles and stuff to like help along your business. Where do you see like for, not just you, but other people, like what are some cool opportunities you see like with making money online right now?
it, it is so overwhelming in a good way. Like there are so
Hmm.
many cool opportunities. I think the online social media business and creator business is going to scale. I don't even remember the exact numbers, but to multiple billions or whatever that was, like 5, 10 to 10x of what we are currently. So I think people like out there wondering like, is it too saturated? Like, do we not have enough opportunity right now? Am I too late to the game? Like, no, you're not. Like, start today. And figure the game out and figure out
Yep.
people that have done it. I always go to fast forward your journey by just meeting with mentors and paying money for access to those mentors to just speed
Yeah.
up your journey. It makes so much sense in the world to me. I
So
mean,
valuable.
it's what 2x my business, which was already doing very well when I met up with my coaches and I just said, hey guys, let's figure this thing out. Let's 2x, 3x my business. And we've been able to because I paid them a lot of money.
Yeah, that's awesome. And then here towards the end of the podcast, as someone who has 50% of their net worth in the world of crypto, it'd be a big fail on my part if we didn't talk a bit about that because you are pretty gung ho about Bitcoin, Ethereum, especially. So when did that start, and why did you start getting into that?
Yeah, so actually it was at Deloitte. I remember back in 2015, my buddy said, "Hey, I got some Bitcoin." I was like, I didn't know what it was. I was like, "What are
Hmm.
you talking about?" Like he's like, "Yeah, but like $2,000 in Bitcoin." And I was like, "Okay, what is this thing?" He couldn't explain it to me. And so like
Yeah,
I kind of researched it. And I was like, "Okay, what is this?" Like it's starting to make it. It kind of seems a little weird. Like I was like a little skeptical about it. So years went by, and Deloitte started implementing blockchain technology trainings. And I was like, okay, Deloitte's always on the forefront of everything. If they're
hmm,
implementing crypto and blockchain technologies into our trainings as CPAs, as auditors, and tax professionals and consulting professionals, there's something to this. So I went down the rabbit hole of YouTube, the rabbit hole of like your content, other people's content, of understanding like what this core um, thing was of cryptocurrency and blockchains and stuff like that, NFTs and all this, all the new Web3 stuff. And I was like, this is a no brainer. It makes a lot of sense. The decentralized nature and all that kind of stuff. But I knew that where we were in society and historically speaking is like there's going to be like that .com era. I feel as in a sense
yep,
like there's going to be a lot of failures. So not to get hung up on the Doge coins and like the crazy things like that. At that things have
hmm,
changed and stuff over time, but like those crazy like altcoins that were going to go to the moon type deal. But really understand like the core technology behind what's going on and really investing in that and taking a chance because even if it doesn't work out Ethereum and Bitcoin, like it's going to work out. There's going to be cryptocurrency. There's going to be
hmm.
Web3. There's going to be NFTs at some point in time. Like that's very mainstream and normal.
Yeah. What percentage of your net worth is the crypto portion?
About 2%.
Okay, cool.
Pretty
And
small.
are you continuing to add pretty aggressively to that?
Yeah, every single Sunday I add more and more to it. And I, if it obviously where we're at with the market, it's down. But like if it were to shoot up exponentially onto the market, I mean, it could be way larger than 2% pretty quick.
Yeah, cool. Well, I am super glad you were on that train. I think that train is gonna when that leaves the station, a lot of people are gonna be like, I wish, because we're still so early, like you were kind of alluding to there.
So early.
So, last question for you is one I like to try to ask everybody, and this is a little bit easier for you because your journey has taken place mostly in your 20s because you just hit your 30s. But if you could like shake your 20-year-old self and just get them to learn one thing or understand one single concept or lesson or whatever, what would that be?
Take a bet on yourself and take that chance. Like, that is by far the biggest return you're ever going to get on yourself. And I wish I would have done that earlier in my 20s and I waited till like 27, 28. I actually left at 29 years old for my 9 to 5. Try to do this at 20. Like, really start taking the chance. If you're in college and you don't love your major or whatever, take a chance on a business venture. Like, really dive in and give yourself it, like give it your all, and really, like, you owe it to yourself to see what you're capable of. So if it fails, no one's expecting anything of you in your 20s. Just take the chance and fail and learn from it and go on with that.
Yeah, I love that. That's awesome. Cool. That's a great way to end this one. Brennan, thank you for your time. This was fun. We talked about lots of practical stuff. I think it'll be really helpful for people. And I will leave a link, several links to all this stuff, including the tweet and the thread that I talked about in the description of this. But Brennan, thank you so much. It was a pleasure to have you.
Yeah, thank you as well, Andy. Appreciate it.